they're not football teams. You don't have to support the Liberal Party until the day you die, or the Labor Party.
Hi, I'm Evelyn Ray. Welcome to another episode of the New South Wales One Nation TV. Today I'm joined with Tripp. He is the candidate for the seat of Warringah. Super excited to have him here to hear his thoughts on things, on policies and what's happening in the world. So thank you so much for joining me, Stephen.
Hi, Evelyn. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, you obviously haven't always been into politics, and I always like to sort of get a little bit about the person who's running for a particular seat. I think many Aussies want to see who it is that they're voting for. So if you don't mind, I'd love to hear your story, your background before politics.
Well, I've always been interested in politics. Even when I was a little kid, I used to watch the news in the morning and follow politics quite closely. I was always interested in it, but I kind of never pursued a career in it because I was just busy working. I've been an engineering surveyor for 15 years now. So that's in the construction industry, and we work long hours. Like sometimes we're working like 60 hours a week. So, been quite busy with that. And if you'd asked me a year ago, or if you told me a year ago that I would be running for the seat of Warringah, I would be like, wow, did things get really that bad?
Yeah.
But I just feel like that this is the time where you might not necessarily want to do it, but you feel a duty to stand up and represent the community, because just the state of modern politics, like everyday people like myself just need to stand up. And that's the way it's meant to be. It's meant to be government by representation. It's not meant to be these career politicians and celebrities dominating the political scene. It's just meant to be everyday people representing their community and standing up for what they believe in. So in Warringah here, we've got a particular problem with the incumbent, Zali Steggall. She's got a real problem now with, she claims that she's got integrity and trust, and it's just come out that she's accepted $100,000 from a coal director. So, and when she stands on a platform of climate change and renewable energy. And then the Liberals, just yesterday, it came out that they're in fractional war in the Warringah seat, especially. It's the left versus the right. So, that's the state of of politics. And we just came out of a pandemic where politicians were up on TV saying, "You won't get your freedoms back until I tell you." Well, it doesn't work like that. And if everyday people like myself don't stand up to that, well, they're just going to keep going. It's just going to be an incremental thing. And if there's no pushback, then it's just going to get worse and worse. So, I was happy in construction, working as a surveyor. I was quite content. Like, it's not an easy job, but a lot of the time it is rewarding and enjoyable. And I guess that's why I'm here now. I just couldn't go along with what was happening in this country. And I love this country. We've always had such, we're the lucky country, and we've got, such strong freedoms here, and we have to protect them. We have to push back. There's no line that they can go up to. Like, you just have to protect those freedoms at all costs.
I think the Liberal Party, who used to be sort of known in Australia as the Conservative sort of party, but they most certainly, and as of recently, we can see that they're not. They actually aren't. And so
what surprised me is that they have a left faction. Like, this doesn't it just seems to go against what they should be. So, and then it's just like the Labor Party. The Labor Party is the same. They've always had a left and right faction that are more concerned with their own personal vendettas and war. Like a Liberal member came out just yesterday and said that they're in a civil war. Well, they obviously don't care about real issues with real people. Like, they don't care about the people of Warringah. They're more concerned on their own fractional battles. And I think if you look back in history, when Robert Menzies founded the Liberal Party, it was because the United Party, came to a point where they couldn't continue and he wanted a very fresh start. And I think sometimes in politics, like, you know, we've always had the Liberal Party and the Labor Party. Well, maybe they have a life term where it gets to the point where they're just so divided. There's too many factions. There's too many career politicians, and it just needs to hit that reset button, and a new party needs to emerge. And I think One Nation is definitely a great example of, a party. You know, we've been there for 25 years. We've got runs on the board. You know, you've got Pauline Hanson and Malcolm Roberts in the federal Senate. You've now got Mark Latham in New South Wales. So we're growing, we're getting stronger, and we're definitely a credible alternative to the Liberal Party, which I think are just fractioning and falling apart.
Yeah, I definitely think politics in Australia is ripe for a revival. It's been ripe for a long time, but we just can't seem to break the mold. It's like a generational thing. I'm not sure if you have experienced it, but you just kind of vote what your mum or your dad vote, and then they just sort of voted what their grandparents vote. So you have these Liberal, Labor, Greens voters who have just generationally voted that way without looking at policies, without taking an interest, but just because that's just what you do. So I do like that people like yourself and One Nation, you're not career politicians. You're coming out, you're breaking that mold, you're showing an alternative option. And I really hope more than ever people actually take an interest in politics and policies. And I guess that's why you are running with One Nation, because they obviously fit the mold that you like. And I sort of wanted to get into, in particular, your area that you're running for, which is the Warringah seat. And it used to be Tony Abbott's seat. So I'm not sure whether you might know more than me, whether he was in that old sort of Liberal fraction or whether it's sort of changed or not over the course of the years since then. And just the problems that you can sort of identify in your area, things that have been mishandled by the current politicians in that area. And I guess if you were elected into that particular spot, what you would do to rectify those sorts of things.
Well, one thing I'll say straight off the bat is that they're not football teams. You don't have to support the Liberal Party until the day you die, or the Labor Party. No, it's not like, my colour's red, my colour's blue. No, you need to vote based on their policies, the candidate they put forward, and whether they represent you, your electorate, and the nation. So, in Warringah, we just need someone that's going to represent Warringah. Like, we've been neglected for a long time because we've had Tony Abbott there for a long time. He was in a safe seat. He didn't have to, we all know that marginal seats, they get all the money thrown at them. Well, Warringah's been neglected. And the congestion in this area, especially along Warringah Road and other areas, sometimes it's just gridlock and you can't get anywhere. Like, since moving to this area, like I can understand why people in the northern beaches and Mossman, they don't go anywhere. They stay in their area because it's so much easier. Like, if you have to go into other areas of Sydney, it's especially on a Saturday or in peak hour traffic, it's just a battle. Why hasn't nothing ever been done? Well, you've always had, a safe seat here, a safe Liberal seat, and they haven't had to throw any money at it. So they've talked about the Northern Beaches Tunnel, which I support. That would be great, but they need to get on and build it. We need it now. We don't need it, 10 years in the future. Like, it's we're behind already, so we need to catch up. And another thing is just congestion generally. I mean, we've been fortunate the last 2 years with COVID. Like, with the lockdowns, the only one good thing about the lockdown was the fact that there was no traffic on the road, so it was easy to get around. But once we open up and we start, bringing people into the country again, like, can Warringah really support another 5,000 people coming into the area without some sort of decentralisation of other areas of Sydney, or a curtail of maybe how many people we bring into the country, or maybe just cap it at, we need to build up regional areas. So, like, people that we do bring into the country are kind of pushed more into maybe places like Goulburn instead of Warringah, because we just can't deal with the overpopulation here. Like, it's becoming a real concern, and we just haven't had a candidate that's willing to say anything about that. And also with climate change, well, you have Zali Steggall there, who's definitely for renewables. She's, you know, very much on the climate change bandwagon. But it seems the Liberals are now as well. They're putting forward their left candidate. So there's no other party apart from One Nation who, for example, say we want to get out of the Paris Agreement, or you know, we don't necessarily agree with all the climate change narrative out there. Like my first project, when I worked my first surveying project that I worked on was up on the Gold Coast. I was working on the desalination plant up there, and when I got there, it was around May, and they were panicking. They're saying we need to get this project done as quickly as possible because Tim Flannery has said it's never going to rain in southeast Queensland ever again. You know, it's not, you know, even if it does rain, it's not going to fill up the dams, you know, and the ground will still be parched. Well, the first wet season that came around in January, it rained for about 2 weeks straight, flooded the whole job. We didn't work for about a month, and after that point, it was so cruisy on that job because they didn't even need a desalination plan anymore. So these are the sorts of advice that people like Zali Steggall are relying on. So I just say, what climate predictions have actually come true? We're more than a decade into this now, and they keep moving the goalposts.
Yeah,
you know, first it was global warming, but back in the 70s it was global cooling. Now it's climate change. You know, now
you forgot the ozone layer. I remember my childhood was the hole in the ozone layer.
What happened with that? Did the ozone layer just fix itself? You know, so and now they have this climate change thing where any little weather event that happens, suddenly it's climate change. Bushfires, it's climate change. Floods, it's climate change. Drought is climate change. Well, we've had that in Australia for a very long time. And I know there's always a big media beat up about it, but and there's a lot of fear, unfortunately, especially with young children. You know, especially with the indoctrination in their schooling. It's quite worried. So One Nation is the only party that's putting forward, you know, a pushback to climate change,
which is fantastic. I think a lot of people are fearful that this renewable alternative, one, is unachievable. Two, it's going to end up being less conservative for the environment anyway with the production of all of these. And three, it's just not going to be cost effective or actually work. So it's a subject that a lot of Australians want to know more about. And you know,
the problem is they're throwing so much money at it as well. And a lot of the time they're throwing it at foreign companies to implement it. Well, if renewables are there, then they can stand on their own 2 feet without all the money throwing at it. And then people can choose, you know, if you want to have solar panels on your roof, okay, fair enough. You're going to have to, you know, upgrade them every 10 years or so. But if that's your choice, then that's fine. But don't throw taxpayers' money into this big, massive pot that a lot of, you know, I've heard that there might be potentially politicians within the Liberal Party that heavily invested in renewables, and I guess that's why you have a left faction now within the Liberal Party. So you know,
and you've also mentioned, particularly in your area of Warringah, the aged care sort of situation. I'd love to hear sort of more about your position on that.
Well, a lot of the aged care position that I have is based on personal experience. Back in 2018, my grandfather, he was 96, he ended up in an aged care facility. And we went to go and visit him, and it was just horrifying, the conditions in there, you know. When he was in there, and he'd had some falls at home and things like that, and, you know, the family couldn't keep him at home anymore. Like, you know, my grandparents had a big house, and my grandmother just couldn't look after him. So unfortunately, he ended up in an aged care facility, and it wasn't cheap, I can tell you. But you know, you walk in there and you can just tell straight away that this is not a place that you want to be. And you know, we asked him what type of food he had, and just for lunch they gave him this little small sausage roll. Like, there's no nutrition in that at all. Like, how are you meant to function just on that? And he didn't even eat it because he said it was doughy, and he just wouldn't touch it. And I asked him, like, what activities do you guys do in here? And he just said, there's a movie night, like maybe once a week. Like, how are you meant to occupy your time in there? And when we first visited him, he he had his walker, but he could still zip around, like he'd do laps around the kitchen and things like that. But only a month or so later, when we visited him again, he was bedbound, and you know, he passed away pretty quickly, so he wasn't in there for too long. But I was just horrified with the conditions in there, and I've heard people say they should swap the prisons with the aged care facilities, because prisoners get treated better. You know, they can exercise, they can have outdoor time, they get much better food. I think the budget for their food is twice what it is in aged care. And we just had a royal commission into aged care. One of their findings was that they've had 20 other reports into aged care that all came back with the same conclusions. I mean, that the problems with aged care are clearly known. Like, it's not a secret what's happening. So do something about it. There was 148 recommendations in the Royal Commission. I don't think you're going to get a more concise report than a Royal Commission. It's really the top. So start doing something about it. I mean, sometimes you can't make it perfect. You just have to make it happen. And the recommendations of the Royal Commission, that's a start. You know, get onto it straight away. You know, you can look through it. There might be things you can action straight away. There might be things that take a little bit longer, but we really need to act, because right now, as I'm speaking to you, there are people in aged care dealing with the issues that I mentioned and other things that are in the Royal Commission. Like, we can't allow that to keep going.
I think I've had similar experiences as well, where I've seen loved ones go to a nursing home and they go downhill pretty quickly. I think that in itself is pretty telling. And I mean, you know, there's always going to be the argument that they had to go there because they are on the decline. But there are some people who choose to go there maybe before they need to, because of comfort and ease and, you know, availability of certain services. And they tell horrifying stories about things they've experienced. Unfortunately, I think as a society, we sort of view the elderly as an inconvenience, which is very backwards. And unfortunately, I think we see children that way as well. But you know, you sort of mentioned how 2018 your grandfather went there. I mean, thank goodness he missed being in there during COVID, because I had a loved one in a nursing home who didn't see anyone for the last 2 years before she passed away. I couldn't even go to the funeral. And I know that the pandemic, the handling of the pandemic, the government's response, these are things that you're also quite sort of passionate about, and things that you would like to rectify if elected into the seat of Warringah. Can you kind of help explain or sort of give an indication of things that you think weren't handled correctly and how you would have handled it differently?
Well, again, like, my grandmother passed away during COVID, and I couldn't see her a whole year before she passed away. And she didn't pass away from COVID. It was just, you know, she had a heart attack. So, you know, we thought we were doing the right thing by, you know, following the rules, by the, you know, the health advice that we never saw the health advice, by the way. And One Nation is the only party that is calling for a Royal Commission into the pandemic management. You know, think about, you know, we're kind of, it's amazing how all the restrictions and the lockdowns ended just before the election. Like, magically they've just come off now, despite, you know, despite the case numbers. Like, we don't hear about the case numbers in the news anymore and things like that. Whereas back in the day, if we had 5 cases and it was a meltdown, everyone was in panic mode. So it's going to be hard for us to keep reminding everyone of what we went through during lockdown, but it's not over. Like, ProBuild, the big construction company, it went out of business only last week, and that was a result of lockdowns. Like, all those workers, what are they going to do for employment now? You know, they're out of work, and all the subcontractors, they're not going to get paid. And all the businesses throughout the lockdown, you know, how they, you know, how can they survive? There's 4 lease signs all around Warringah of businesses that went under during that time. And the worst part about it all is that all the politicians and all the bureaucrats, they didn't take any pay cut. They were happy to stand at these press conferences and dictate to us how, you know, how we should wash our hands, and we need to wear masks and all this sort of stuff, and claim that they were protecting us. Well, why didn't they take a big pay cut as well? It only seems fair. So, the first thing is definitely have a royal commission, and and the other thing is for each individual voter out there, don't reward them with your vote. So this is the first chance that we've had to really show them that we don't agree with what they did. We don't agree with their response, and we don't agree with the draconian measures that they enforced upon us. Especially with the vaccine mandates. Like I'm a result of that. I lost my job due to a mandate, and I was working on my dream project. It was probably the best project I've ever been on, and straight away these mandates came in, and for 5 weeks I was out of work. Thankfully, I was able to find something else, but within those 5 weeks, I'm thinking, how am I going to pay my mortgage? We've just had a young baby. Our daughter was only a couple months old when it happened. I know it was the first time for me being a father and my partner being a mother, and suddenly I'm out of work, and I'm fit, I'm healthy, I'm definitely capable of doing my job. I'm highly regarded in the industry, but I can't work. And many other people are like that. Many other teachers that have been teaching for 30 years are out of work now. So especially a Liberal, in New South Wales, we have a Liberal state government. We have a Liberal federal government. They're meant to be supporting small business, and they're meant to be, making it easier for people to get ahead and stand on their own 2 feet. They're meant to believe in individual sovereignty, and you have your own freedoms and your own choices in life. And I just feel personally we can't let them get away with it. And I mean, that's a big reason why I'm running, to give people an alternative. Like, you don't have to vote for these people. Yeah. And you shouldn't. I don't think you should. I mean, everyone's got their own personal opinions and views and choices, but that's just my personal view.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of division at the moment. There's division within homes between parents and kids over climate change, like we sort of mentioned before. There's division about, mandates or non-mandates. There's division everywhere. But something else that you've mentioned that you're quite passionate about is education, indoctrination, what's going on in our schools. I'd love for you to sort of elaborate on that.
It just baffles me. Like, maybe I'm naive or something like that, but I just don't feel that schools are in place for indoctrination. They shouldn't be learning about gender fluidity and critical race theory and all these social engineering woke agendas that have kind of gotten into our schools. I just think that schools are meant to be a place where you go and learn your times tables and learn how to read and write, and just the basics to kind of get you ahead in life. So you can go out into the world and know what you want to do for a career. And maybe that, instead of teaching, gender fluidity, maybe they should teach kids on how to do their taxes, or, how negative gearing works, or something, something that's going to be real value for them when they become an adult. I mean, you might agree with all this ideology, but school is not a place for it. It's not school. Like, it's not for kids. Like, they don't need to be exposed to that. There's plenty of time when they're adult for them to be exposed to that sort of stuff, and hopefully by then they're mature enough and they're well researched enough to be able to make an informed decision on those sorts of things. But when you're a kid, you don't know any better. I remember when I was at school, a modern history teacher stood up at the front of the class and said, "Oh, well, communism is works in theory but not in practice." And when you're that age, you can't formulate an argument against that because you don't even know what communism is. So it gets in your head straight away. Whereas the reality is it doesn't work in theory either. That's, it's a, and you can argue all day about those points, but it should be completely removed from the classroom. And thank God we've got Mark Latham in New South Wales, who's done so much to push back against it. But apart from One Nation, I don't hear anyone else really voicing their opinions about it. They're just happy for it to happen.
Yeah, I love Mark's take on the education. He's so fierce and he's so bold about it, regardless of the mob and the pushback. And I love that he's sort of fighting for the rights of our kids and the right for an education schoolyard is not a place for political activism by any means.
No.
You should teach kids how to think, how to use logic and reason, not what to think and what they should be thinking. So I love that you're on board with that. I love that
I think it's quite clear that that's their agenda. Get the kids while they're young, and because they don't know any, they can't formulate their own arguments because they don't know enough. Like, you think about your own life, and you always think that, when you're in your early 20s, you think you know the world, and then you get to 25 and you're like, well, I didn't know the world that much. And you get to 30, and life starts kind of beating you down and things like that, and you become a little bit more humble and a little bit more well versed in things. But when you're a kid, like, you just want to be able to play with your friends and maybe learn some times tables and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And something as well that you've mentioned, which I find interesting, is you claim that you're not a Christian man, like you don't follow that religion, but you acknowledge Christian ethics, I guess, in Australia as a society. So I'm really curious how, because it's a pretty bold stance to sort of take and a pretty bold acknowledgement to sort of make, and love to hear more about your interest in that sort of subject.
Well, I'm agnostic, so I don't have a dog in the race, but I just find it fascinating to learn about how the Christian religion influenced, our forms of government, and where all that came from. Because you think, okay, we're free in Australia, but how did we get that way? Well, it came from Christianity. It came from the belief that no one was above anyone else. Even kings and queens and politicians and dictators. No, you're all equal under Christianity and under God. So I just find that fascinating, and I think that's a big reason why they're trying to attack Christianity and make Christianity, like, people that believe in God, oh, well, they're just loony, and that we're living in the 21st century now, and these people need to get with the times. They're not focusing on the strengths of and I'm not saying that believing in God is not a strength. It is for people. Their faith and their belief is very important for them. But there's also another element, which is the fundamental principles that Western civilizations were built on. It was built on the fundamental beliefs of Christianity. You had the Ten Commandments. That's where a lot of the laws came from. And I mean, you can just look back through history. Some examples of atheist governments, where you had the Nazis in Germany. You had the Soviets in Russia. You had Mao Zedong in China, and they killed tens of millions of people. That's the result of an atheist government. So a big reason why we have our freedoms here, and our constitution. Our constitutions are there to protect against human behavior, human instinct, because people of the Christian faith are aware of that, of the flaws of humanity, and they want to protect against them. So it's just one of those things where, I can't claim to be a religious person, but it's just so interesting to me to learn about these things. And I'm not completely well versed. I'm definitely not an expert by any means, but I definitely recognize the importance of Christianity in our government, in our system.
I think Mark Latham holds a pretty similar position to you. And when I interviewed Mark a little while ago, I said to him, you stand up for the rights of Christians more than churches do these days, because Mark was, sort of fighting for no division within the churches with the mandates of vaccines and things like that. So, I think it's a healthy acknowledgement to certainly have, and I appreciate your opinion and your insights on that. But, I wanted to talk about career politicians. When I first asked you why you got into politics and things, you did mention the career politicians, the famous people. You mentioned how, we need someone to actually represent the people and not their own interests. I'd love to get how you feel about this sort of trend that we're seeing with Australia and Australian politics, with these career politicians and these sort of celebrities, so to speak.
Well, look at the factions in the major parties. Like, they're more concerned about their own factional alliance than they are about representing the people, or maybe putting the best candidate ahead of the electorate. They're not like in Warringah, the Liberal Party, I've heard, are not even really interested about contesting the electorate because they're more concerned with their factional battles. So how are we meant to elect someone that's going to stand up for what we believe in when they're just going to fall in line with whatever factions they're a part of? And if you look at the Labor Party, they can't step out of line, outside the party, the narrative and the party position. Like, they have no free thinkers there at all. So you get this one-size-fits-all approach that's often watered down or influenced by the left or whatever. So all I can say is that I'm here. I don't have any factions behind me. I'm really only here by myself. I have a couple of people around me, but I'm just standing here based on purely my own convictions, my own beliefs, and I'm just mainly just letting the people of Warringah know that you now have another option. You don't have to vote for Labor, you don't have to vote for Liberal, and you certainly don't have to vote for Zali Steggall. And I think people will get into the trap where they think it's just an option. Oh, I can only choose Labor or Liberal. They're the only government you can have. It's not true. There's certainly other parties that can rise up and form government. And look, One Nation, we already have members of Parliament. We already have the runs on the board. You can certainly go look at their track record and our policies. You can go on our website and look at our policies. Like, there's enough policies there for a national government. So, you just really need to take a look at the candidates that these parties are putting forward, and whether or not, firstly, do they live in the community, and do they represent the community? Do they represent Warringah, or do they represent the party and the faction that they're a part of? So honestly, I think it's getting to the point where Labor and Liberal, they're dying on the vine because they're just tearing themselves apart, and they really need to hit the reset button.
I think every seat at this point is important. And I think every vote is so important. The last 2 years, if that doesn't wake people up to take an interest in politics, I honestly don't know what will. I'm encouraged by people like yourself who aren't career politicians. That's an attractive quality in a politician these days. And that you're giving people an alternative option, like you said, and you're going to represent Warringah, not the party, which is music to Australians' ears right now.
And I just hope people will recognise that I'm not a polished politician. I didn't go to the scumbag school where you learn how to be part of the Liberal Party in the late. I wasn't a young Liberal. I wasn't in young Labor. I wasn't part of the union movement or anything like that. I'm just like many of you out there who been focused on your careers and building a family and trying to build yourself up in life. But and I'd love to continue to do that, but it gets to the point where you really need to step forward and stand up and push back against the state of modern politics.
Absolutely. So where can people go to reach out to you? Because we've covered a variety of subjects today, but people really need to know all of your policies. People need to know everything that you kind of stand for. And if they want to maybe reach out to you and ask more questions, or if they want to have a conversation with you, have you got any, can you give people resources? Can you point people where they can contact you? Have you got any events coming up where they might be able to meet you face to face?
Yeah, well, I'd encourage everyone firstly to go to the One Nation website, the national federal website. That's got all the candidates up there now. So if you don't live in Warringah, there might be a candidate in your area, and it's got all their contact information on there, and it's got a little short bio about myself. So if you want to learn a little bit more about me, you can go to the candidate section in the One Nation website and just search for Warringah. You'll see my face there, and you can learn a little bit more background about me. In terms of getting in contact with me, I'm happy for people to reach out to me and email me directly. It's just Warringah at newsouthwales.onenation.org.au. So email me directly. I might not be able to answer all your questions, but I'll just be honest if I can't. I'll just I'll let you know. look, I'm not across this. I might even ask. I had one person email me the other day where I kind of knew what they were talking about and I had a position on it, but I just said to them, hey, if you've got any more information about this, send it through to me, because I want to, I want to be across all the issues. So, it's for me, it's more about listening than talking. I can get up here and talk all day, but if I'm not listening to the electorate, then I'm not here to do what I'm meant to do. I'm meant to listen and address, the concerns of the electorate. And I might not always agree with you. And, sometimes you can't always act on everything, but I'm definitely willing to listen. And, before construction, I was in the working for the Commonwealth Bank, and back then they used to tell us, if there's anything you can't deal with, at least deal with it by close of business. So I've always got the mentality that I just don't like to let things drag on. I want to deal with them straight away. So happy for people to reach out to me by email. I'm also on Facebook, facebook.com/Stephen Tripp .PHON, Pauline Hanson'S One Nation. So you can find me on Facebook as well. So they're the best ways of getting in contact with me. And Facebook's great as well, because I can make posts about policy and I can put videos on there and things like that. So I would really encourage people to go to the Facebook as well.
Absolutely. And I would encourage people to follow you, to reach out, take an interest in politics, take an interest in the people who are going to be running for your particular area in a seat, and pick the one that suits you the best, not just what you've always done. So I really appreciate your time today, Stephen. It's been very insightful and very wise. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your success in the future.
No, I really appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.